Hello! The shortlist for this year's Booker Prize is going to be announced in a week's time on September 21st. So I'm here with some predictions and guesses and wishes for what I want to be on this year's shortlist. So I've been diligently reading through the long list. I've not read all of these books yet, so this isn't an entirely authoritative prediction for what will be on the shortlist. It's just part of the fun of following book prizes and making guesses like this. And the winner for the Booker Prize isn't going to be announced until November 26th. So we still have a long way to go. I've been consciously saving some of these books and taking my time reading through them and reading other books that I'm just interested in as well, because there's a long way to go in this prize season cycle. But I have been really enjoying reading some of these books, some excellent titles, and a couple of the books which I do think are going to be on the shortlist and which I'm currently in the middle of reading along with my new book group, which I'll put information to below and a link to below if you want to join along with us discussing these books. I'm right in the middle of reading both of these books, and we're having really interesting conversations about them, bringing up so much subject matter that I hadn't thought about before. So if you want to join in that discussion, please do. It'd be great to see you there. But what wonderful books. I sort of knew that these would be great reading experiences, which is part of the reason why I was hoping they would be chosen for our first book club choice. And they're quite long books, so it's really great to read along and discuss some of the subject matter and find some surprising parallels. Like there's the issue of men who are having financial difficulties and not really able to admit that this is happening in both of these books, even though they're set in very different contexts and places in Penang in the 1920s and in contemporary Ireland. And it's really interesting when you're reading along with the book prize and you can see kind of overlapped in subject matter or in styles or in characters that you might not have discovered if you were just reading these books independently. But what I'm gripped by both of these stories. So there's The House of Doors and this rich tale of the life of W. Somerset Maugham when he traveled to the Far East, and a couple that he stays with, and about his own financial difficulties of the time and relationship, his very complicated romantic life, and the very complicated life of the wife and mother that he meets there, and her really interesting past, which is kind of slowly coming out. And so it's such a gripping tale, but also so beautifully written. And I think it's a fairly safe bet for the shortlist, since Twan has been listed for both of his books in the past, and I expect this book will do really well. And there's also the Bee Sting, which is quite an epic story of a family in modern day Ireland who is also experiencing real financial difficulties, but each member of the family is also going through their own personal struggles, and there's a lot of hidden things in the past which you're slowly getting clues about. So it's such an intriguing story, but also there's such great wit to this and humor to it in a very particular Irish way that I really enjoy. Also really psychologically interesting characters, and a story that's just pulling me through as it moves between the perspectives of the different characters and family members. So really enjoying reading this, and about halfway through reading it. Now, I'm also going to predict another Irish writer of Paul Lynch and his novel Prophet Song, set in a future, unspecified future in Ireland, when the authoritarian government is locking down on the population, increasingly restricting their freedom and becoming involved with a conflict with rebels from within the country and without, fighting in this larger battle, and following the perspective of a woman who finds herself completely caught in this conflict, where she has a very busy and full professional and personal life, and following the details of that, and how her life quickly crumbles under this increasingly repressive system. It's so vividly written, very powerful and terrifying, and I was completely struck by this book and immediately felt that it's a front runner for this year's prize. I also think that we will see Western Lane by Chetna Maroo on this year's shortlist. This feels kind of like the little novel that could, and I don't mean that in a demeaning way, and it's just that it's a story which a lot of readers of it have commented that it has very quiet subject matter, and because I think there's not a tremendous amount of plot in this story, but it follows a family, especially an adolescent girl in the time after her mother's death, and following the grief of that family, how they aren't really able to express their feelings about it, and how this sense of grief kind of leaks out in different ways in their day-to-day life, and so confronting this subject matter, but also her coming of age story and development amidst all of this emotional turmoil. And it's so powerful and moving how she conveys this story, and it's a style of writing that I don't think is very popular or well known. It's a book that I think could be overlooked, but which has something very special to say. There's also one of my favorite books from this year, which you knew this was coming, that I'm really hoping will make the shortlist, of In Ascension by Martin MacInnes, and I felt really privileged and lucky to have been able to interview him about this book and his feelings about being listed for the Booker Prize. So I'll put a link to my discussion with him below, but which was a talk I totally just wanted to do on my own, and was my own initiative of wanting to speak to him, because I was so moved and affected by this story of the life of a woman who's a scientist, and her connection with the world and her disconnection with the world, and her investigations into the origins of life, and her feelings about her family, some of which she's sort of blocking and shutting out, but others that she's has to confront, and the way this story moves and creates and instills such a powerful sense of wonder. I was so caught up in this story, and I really hope that it does well in this year's competition. It's a very different book from the other titles that are listed, in that it has these themes of science fiction, but also this sense of identity and our connection with the world and nature, which is so beautiful. And finally, the sixth book I'm predicting to make the shortlist is All the Little Bird Hearts by Viktoria Lloyd-Barlow, which I have not read yet, but following other readers who've been reading along with the prize and who have been surprised and delighted by this novel. It sounds really strong, and I think has a really good chance of making the list, and I'm really looking forward to getting to it. The story of a woman who's neurodivergent, and following her life, her relationship with her daughter, and also some neighbors who kind of intrude upon her life and her habits. And I'm so interested to see how this story will play out, and I'm looking forward to reading it. Now, there are other books which I'm going to discuss in groups of books that I think have a strong chance of making the shortlist, and then other ones which I don't think have a very good chance, or that I actively hope won't make the shortlist, because I might not have enjoyed them or might not want to read them. So there's a group of books. There's If I Survive You, which I thought was really strong, moving, powerful book, which is a collection of tales all centering around a family in Florida, looking at their different perspectives and telling different pieces of their stories that combine whole to this larger story. I didn't pick it for the shortlist because there's some sections and stories which I think work better than others, and but overall, like, a really interesting collection that's so worth reading. There's also Old God's Time by Sebastian, which I think also has a very strong chance of making the shortlist, because Sebastian has been listed many times before, and is such a respected writer and such a powerful writer. I have read the first 2 chapters of this book, and I'm looking forward to reading more of it, because his writing is so beautiful, so eloquent, and also he raises a number of mysteries about this retired policeman's life and his past, and an ongoing case that the police are still investigating. So I'm very intrigued to see how this story plays out. There is also A Spell of Good Things by Ayobami Adebayo about modern-day Nigeria and two individuals and their families, and how their stories gradually overlap over the course of the book, even though you're following them individually through quite a lot of it. I thought this was a very good book. There are sections of it which kind of dragged a bit. It didn't have quite like the tightness and power that I thought her debut novel did, but also really interesting, how she explores how these larger issues of politics and government failings trickle down into have real world effects in the lives of the characters. She is a very strong, interesting writer. And there's also This Other Eden by Paul Harding, which I've not read yet, but heard really good things about, or at least like mixed things about. So I'm not sure if it will make the short list. I think it does have a good chance, because his writing is said to be so powerful, and this story in particular about an island and the fate of the people, the inhabitants of this island, and how that relates to what is going on in the larger country, does sound really interesting. But I've not read it yet, but it's one that I'm still looking forward to reading, regardless of whether it's shortlisted or not for the prize. That I'm looking forward to reading it over the coming months. Now, then, there are finally a few books which I don't think will make the shortlist of Pearl, which a number of readers have really enjoyed, but have felt like, especially in the context of a competition, probably won't make the shortlist, or at least that's my sense from reading other readers' responses. But it is, again, a novel that I still really want to read. The bookmark is peeking out of the cover of this book, and that I still, really want to read, regardless of whether it's shortlisted for the prize or not. It's quite a short book, but one that sounds really interesting, and so that I do want to experience for myself. Now, there's also How to Build a Boat, and this is the book that I've probably heard the most criticism of since following the prize, and people who are reading for the prize, of just a lot of people that are quite disappointed by it, or who did enjoy some aspects of it but felt the ending really let it down. So it's a book that I think really doesn't have a very good chance of making the shortlist. And there's also Study for Obedience, which I actively hope won't make the shortlist, because I tried reading this, didn't get very far, even though it's quite a short book, but I just found it so tedious and like such a slog that I decided to put it aside. And I know a lot of other readers have felt the same way. Now, I have had some criticism from some readers who did find this a very powerful read, and certainly there are a number of very positive reviews for this book. But my overall sense of this is that the people who have felt it was a strong book are reading more into it, or taking from the concept of the book rather than the actual content of it, and maybe that's unfair of me to observe that about this book, but personally, the actual content of this story felt so frustrating to read, and I know she's creating an overall message with this story and the style of the narration, but it just really wasn't working for me, and so I really hope it doesn't make the short list. So those are my predictions, and will these books make? I'm missing one, aren't I? Where is it? Oh yeah, there's the 6 books. Yeah. These are the 6 books I hope will be shortlisted for this year's prize. So let me know what you think. Have you been reading along with this prize? Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Are there other titles you would chop and change with the books that I'm predicting will be on the shortlist? Or are you waiting for the shortlist to come out to start following this book prize and reading this year's titles? And which books from the long list are you still looking forward to reading, regardless maybe of whether they are shortlisted for the prize or not. I think it's such a great thing about book prizes, that especially ones that publish long lists like this, that you can really pick and choose from the titles that you're most interested in and most drawn to, because probably not all of the books are ones that will work for you. And I've definitely been finding that following this year's prize. So thank you for watching. It'll be really interesting to see which books are actually shortlisted on September 21st. So let's wait and see what the judges decide. And I will speak to you again soon. Bye-bye.